And a hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 164 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Monday, late afternoon into early evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, enjoy the content, but haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you end up catching this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So today is the 87th birthday of Jack Nicholson. And as I was going over some earlier episodes, came to a bit of a shocking realization. Because of course, individual episodes, or if somebody asks you what you did perhaps in a particular week, you have a good idea of, oh, I covered this. But I didn't know just how little Jack Nicholson's name has even come up on the channel. I posted a lot of shorts which featured him. I did a thing last week comparing his performance style with Redford and how the two of them had two big movies that came out around the same time, Jack with A Few Good Men and Redford with Sneakers. And I kind of crossed and imagined a scenario in which each guy played the other's role and had a little fun with that. But of the kind of fearsome foursome, and in this instance, fearsome foursome, Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford, Warren Beatty, Jack Nicholson. I love Jack Nicholson as much as those other guys. But I have spent significant amounts of time discussing Warren Beatty from the career perspective and individual movie, Dustin Hoffman, career perspective and individual movie, and Robert Redford especially. I mean, 2 weeks ago, this was like the Robert Redford channel. So I don't know exactly why I have not specifically focused on Jack. Maybe because there wasn't an on this day, or now it's just his birthday because I did a retrospective on Warren Beatty for his birthday, for example. But his absence on this channel should not in any way indicate that I don't put him on the exalted perch of those other three guys. And, slightly younger Al Pacino, slightly older Clint Eastwood, although Clint's not an actor on the level of those others, I would say. But in terms of career, Gene Hackman, certainly the level of those others as far as film acting. So I don't really have any excuse. I'm sorry. But I am an unabashed fan of Jack Nicholson. Now, I don't, like my top five, it would be considered an unconventional top five. And I should point out, the other three kings, so you could say the four kings, like when they discuss boxing, informally, the four kings in boxing are, because they fought in and around the same weight class at the same time, Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran, the four kings. These guys, to me, are the four kings because Beatty, Hoffman, Redford, and Jack, their birthdays are all, I believe, within 1 year of each other. And the only one of the four who's still active is Hoffman. And maybe he just doesn't know what he would do with himself. And the reality is that Dustin Hoffman looks phenomenal for his age. Even though he let his hair go gray, he looks fucking incredible. But then again, you go back to early Dustin Hoffman in Marathon Man, he's pushing 40. He's pushing 40. He's playing a grad student who's probably 25, and he doesn't really look that much older than 25. So everyone ages differently. Jack Nicholson has won 3 acting Oscars, and he is retired now. He's not coming back. As Redford has said, he's done. Beatty hasn't exactly retired, but he's not coming back either. But Jack's 3 acting Oscars, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, lead. As Good as It Gets, lead. Terms of Endearment, supporting. Now here's the irony. Of those 3, As Good as It Gets is my favorite, but I feel like that movie is overrated and Jack's performance is not really that great. If you ask me who should have won Best Actor in 97, I mean, hell, DiCaprio wasn't even nominated. I thought what he did in Titanic was more impressive than what Jack did. Jack did a little bit of a greatest hits type thing with Melvin Udall. It was an interesting character, but I didn't think he did anything that great. Hell, Dustin Hoffman in Wag the Dog probably didn't win because he just did a feature-length impersonation of his old buddy and Jack's buddy, Robert Evans, the late great movie producer, who Dustin was essentially doing a feature-length impersonation of. See, I would say Robert Duvall for The Apostle, but I thought that film was insanely overrated and overpraised. And as much as I love Robert Duvall, I didn't really think he did anything that great with that movie either. So maybe, now that I'm thinking about it, because Peter Fonda sure as hell wasn't going to win for Ulee's Gold, maybe Jack did deserve it. Maybe 97, and the nominees just weren't as impressive as I remember them. Now, if you had had Russell Crowe as lead actor, or Guy Pearce as lead actor for LA Confidential, well, that would be my pick. Hell, even Kevin Spacey, much as, you don't really want to mention his name, Kevin Spacey is phenomenal in LA Confidential. Ian Holm in The Sweet Hereafter, he could have been nominated. That to me would have been a better choice, but it's neither here nor there. What I'm getting at is I'm not going to focus on any of his Oscar-winning films. I can appreciate One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, won all the major awards. Louise Fletcher, unbelievable. I'm not really a big fan of that movie. I like Terms of Endearment. I don't love it. So how I want to handle this episode, and I'm aware it's a little bit of a greatest hits format, but I want to talk about the movies and the Jack Nicholson performances which made the deepest impression on me. And see, Jack, there are performances of his that I don't like where I feel as if he went into his normal bag of tricks. But he had two movies about 2 decades ago where you saw, even then, when he had been criticized, as I remember one of my dad's old partners, he didn't like the movie Batman because he said he gives the same performance as he did in The Witches of Eastwick. I don't really think that's true, but that it was the same sort of manic, wacky, crazy character, and in it, a villainous light. But Jack, in the early 2000s, back to back, About Schmidt and Something's Gotta Give. And I'm going to come back to those two movies. But I want to tell you what my 5 favorite Nicholson, if we did a combination of his performance and the movie. So I don't love Easy Rider. Easy Rider is what we call a seminal classic. It's one of the key films in new American cinema. It's one of those movies along with, speaking of Warren Beatty, Bonnie and Clyde, The Wild Bunch, Sam Peckinpah, and that the kind of auteur directors were starting to come on the scene, and the old guard of movie critics were starting to be just like, their time has passed. It's time for a different kind of movie to come out of Hollywood. More adult films. If you want to show nudity, fine. You want to show a little sex, fine. You want to make movies with very serious, heavy adult themes of drugs, sex, alcoholism. They had done alcoholism, but movies made a sharp turn into the real. There was a greater level of verisimilitude, to use Richard Donner's famous word to describe what he was trying to do with the original Superman. Reality, even though it's a movie. We're trying to make this as realistic as possible. And Jack was at the forefront of that as an actor in films like Easy Rider and Carnal Knowledge and 5 Easy Pieces. None of those are on my list. I believe that Jack Nicholson's finest hour is Chinatown, which is a film from 1974, which was a period piece. So this is the kind of conversation I love to have, because there are films that are period pieces now that could be set in 1974. Well, Chinatown was made 50 years ago, but it was set in the 30s, which makes it timeless. And Jack's character in that film of Jake Gittes, or J.J. Gittes, he spends a lot of the movie clowning and laughing until things reach a point where he really can't clown and laugh anymore. And it's a mystery, but it's not a conventional mystery. It has suspense and thriller elements, but it's neither a suspense film nor a thriller. it's more of a drama, I guess, from a conceptual standpoint, where the description makes it seem like a different movie. Another film from the same year, Francis Coppola's The Conversation, which I also recently talked about on the channel. That's a movie that has mystery elements, thriller elements, suspense elements, but it is none of those things. It is a character study. And Chinatown, it's not really a character study, although we really go deep with Jake Gittes as he gets in way over his head. And he's a guy who is very clever, very intelligent, more so than he lets on, and he is still overwhelmed by the unbelievable levels of fuckery that is going on around him. And Jack's performance there, he didn't win Best Actor. The Oscars are political. I keep saying it. Nobody even knows what that means when we say the Oscars are political, because now I'm talking about something that happened 50 years ago. But it just meant and means that there are times that certain people seem to win for not the right reasons. And I mentioned how Paul Newman, one of the all-time GOATs himself, won his Best Actor Oscar for a lesser performance in a movie where his co-star, Tom Cruise, should have gotten the award. If anybody was going to win an acting award for Color of Money, it should have been Cruise, who was just a kid, and he just walks right in and takes the movie away from Paul Newman. But Newman somehow wins Best Actor because it was his time. Well, Jack, in 1974, in Chinatown, gives one of the great performances. And for me, it is his finest film acting because of the levels where he has to go, the actor choices that he makes, that Polanski, the filmmaker, would not have been pushing him. There wouldn't have been any reason. He let him do his thing. And every decision that Jack makes as an actor is perfect. Can't teach it. You don't learn it in an acting class. And yet, it is a master class from Jack. And that's a film I always recommend, but the same caveat as I've said with movies such as The Conversation and Blade Runner with Harrison Ford, Ridley Scott's film. Don't go by the description. This is not that movie. You're going to be disappointed. Chinatown is a film you have to allow yourself to be enveloped in the story. Let it work on you. Don't expect it to be something super exciting, up-tempo chase thriller. This isn't Dirty Harry. This isn't Magnum Force. This is not The French Connection. This is a quiet, melancholy, meditative film with all those elements. And it does something that is extraordinary. I mean, there are people that have it, top 10 greatest films to come out of Hollywood in the last, 6 decades. You could still say 5 decades. It's 50 years old. It's that good. And Jack at the center as the man kind of thinks he has a plan, but he has a plan, but it's not really the right plan. And he doesn't know what he's doing because he is getting involved with people that, no, thank you. I'm all set here. It's one of those where just don't get involved. The classic kind of Philip Marlowe where he takes a case and looking back on it, he says, I should have hid under the desk when she came knocking at my door. I should have locked the door and hid under the desk. Jake Gittes in Chinatown probably should have, you know what, Mrs. Mulray, I'm good. You can find someone else. Thank you. No, thank you. I'm all set here. So Jack in Chinatown, it is his finest performance. And whether or not people think it's his best film, many do, for sure. But it's a film that is another one on the list of movies where I wasn't quite ready for it when I first saw it. Meaning, I thought it was good, but I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now as an older person with a greater sense of film history and a greater sense of Jack Nicholson and his career. And people who would dismiss him because there are movies, as I say, that I feel like his performance isn't calibrated correctly, whatever that's worth. But I would say that Chinatown is his best film and his best performance. So if we roll ahead a little bit further in time, he made a number of movies in the 70s that they're just okay. Movies like The Fortune, The Passenger. You can see him stretching and trying and doing something other than what he knew he could do. And I always appreciate whether it's Clint Eastwood, anyone who is willing to stray from their comfort zone. Dustin Hoffman did it in the 70s too. As I said, when he did Marathon Man, he's willing to play a character who's kind of an unlikable asshole, but the people around him are so horrendous, he's the hero. I like that. Clint did it in High Plains Drifter. To a much lesser extent, Jack in Chinatown. But a movie that I don't unabashedly love, but historically, and because of the filmmaker, it's in my Nicholson top 5, is The Shining. And many people, and you might be one of them, that is in their, let's say, top 5 favorite horror films. It is not even in my top 10. I don't think it's scary. I feel like Jack's performance is a bit preposterous. But the more I read about it, and I love the fact that Stephen King has said so many different things, and the author of the book, for those who don't know, about this movie and how he loved Kubrick, but at various points, he felt that Kubrick fucked up. I see what Stanley was doing. Then he goes back to, no, he fucked up. It was hubris. He could have made a better movie. I wish he didn't butcher my book. He honored certain portions. It's like a big, what was it? He said something, it's like a big fun house with nothing really of substance going on. But one of the great quotes was that it wasn't that Jack Nicholson was playing Jack Torrance. It was that Jack was playing an interpretation of himself as Jack Torrance. It's like you're really going down rabbit holes of insanity here. But Jack's performance, if we take it and we look at the movie, yes, there are horror elements, but it's a pitch black comedy about, you really shouldn't be making comedies about mental illness, but his character is clearly not all there. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, or in this case, all work and no play makes Jack go completely off the deep end. So The Shining is a movie I recommend. Not my favorite Kubrick film, would not make my top 5. But the combination of an acting goat in Jack, and Jack gave Stanley what he wanted. This was not a situation where the director lost control of the production or lost control of his actor. No, he did not. He got exactly what he needed out of Jack, even though Jack later joked, each setup was like at least 2, maybe 300 takes. But I gave Stanley what he wanted, But with that being said, as much as Kubrick worked Jack to death on this film, Jack always went out of his way to tell everybody what an absolute genius. He said, it's easy for people on the outside looking in to say, oh, he's a genius. No, I worked with this guy. And I'm telling you, the Nicholson quote was, everyone pretty much acknowledges that Stanley was the man, and I still feel that underrates him. So the level of esteem, as difficult a shoot as The Shining had to have been, whatever Jack thought about Kubrick before they started, yes, it went way up in estimation. So certainly a movie worth seeing. Oh, I feel like most people who would be watching this episode have already seen The Shining, and perhaps multiple times. So I love The Witches of Eastwick. Sometimes listed as a horror film, it's a comedy fantasy. To call it a horror film is a stretch. And I know I get sometimes bogged down on genre. I studied it in a lot of detail. That's why I get bogged down on it. It's not an accident. I didn't randomly wake up one day and get ticked off if a film is misclassified. But The Witches of Eastwick to me is a comedy fantasy. And it's more lighthearted than a description would suggest. Jack basically plays the devil. Darrell Van Horn. He's pretty much playing the devil. And John Updike's novel, this from what I gather, I haven't read it. I know people who did. It's a pretty faithful adaptation. The actresses are all so good. Cher won an Oscar that year. You want to talk about somebody having a killer fucking year. Cher in 1987, Moonstruck, wins the Best Actress Oscar. Okay. Witches of Eastwick. She is phenomenal in this film. Some of her finest film acting. And she also is great in the movie Suspect with Dennis Quaid, which I mentioned recently when I discussed Dennis in the movie Frequency about 2 weeks ago. So Cher was working like the Dickens and knocked all of those performances out of the park. I don't love what she does in Moonstruck, and she won the Best Actress award for that. And maybe that was political because she should have got nominated for Mask and didn't. And then she famously wore an outlandish costume as if to say to the Academy, fuck you, you fucking fucks. So maybe they said, all right, we'll throw her a bone so she doesn't wear anything crazy at this year's Oscars. The Witches of Eastwick, though, Michelle Pfeiffer was on the rise. Great. Susan Sarandon, great. Hell, Veronica Cartwright, an actress I normally don't like, she's great because the character fits her kind of hysterics that she seems to get into in a lot of her roles. And the movie is just... Oh, Richard Jenkins, I'm sorry. He plays the husband to Veronica Cartwright's character. He played a lot of similar characters in movies, and even to this day, he is a home run hitter. A great, reliable supporting actor. Richard Jenkins, awesome. So The Witches of Eastwick, a terrific movie. Yeah, the women they're witches, and I guess they conjure up the devil. It's a lot of stuff that I'm not really 100% sure about. But the movie is so much fun all the way through. Even when Jack's character kind of loses it and gets nasty and vicious and all of that, the film is just incredible amounts of fun. I've seen it at least a dozen times. I could fire it up right now. Towards the end of the movie, Jack has a moment where he is bemoaning women. What are they doing here? Why did God do this to us? He says this, and he goes on this unbelievable screaming tirade while in a church. And I'll just give you a little bit. He goes, women, a mistake? Or did he do it to us on purpose? Because I really want to know. Because if it's a mistake, maybe we can do something about it. It's my favorite Jack Nicholson moment of all time. Individual moment, that's it. His utter meltdown in a church, playing the devil, complaining about God. It's up there with Al Pacino's screaming tirade a decade later in The Devil's Advocate from a completely different angle. He's an absentee landlord! Jack may as well be channeling that 10 years before. He's all but calling the Almighty an absentee landlord. Did he do it to us on purpose? I really want to know. If you haven't seen The Witches of Eastwick, it's readily available on streaming. I know it was on Max. It was, I feel like HBO had a piece in it all those years ago, but it's great. A great performance by Jack, and he's ably supported by the entire supporting cast. The movie is a fucking riot. It has a ton of big laughs, especially in the first half. But it is hysterical. Everyone looks great. The movie is gorgeously shot. And Jack is just so obnoxious, but it works anyway. So what? Now, I am an enormous fan of Tim Burton's 1989 Batman. I don't love Batman Returns, even though from a technological standpoint, from a set design, from an orchestration of the action sequences, top notch. You know, Burton knocks that out of the park. I just don't love Batman Returns. But I think his iteration, the 1989 Batman, it goes for darker, and I feel like it succeeds. And Jack just is extraordinary. He's fucking incredible in that movie. Because it could have been the characters over the top, but not in the way of Jack Torrance in The Shining. It's a more over-the-top interpretation of Joker than certainly Heath Ledger. That was a different, more dangerous, less comedic Joker. But Jack, he sells it because we see him as Jack Napier. And we get an idea of what he is all about. And then after he gets dropped into the vat of chemicals, now he's the Joker. And he is brutal and ruthless, but it's pitched at a different angle. And this is a decision on the part of Tim Burton. He doesn't go as dark as he could. He doesn't go as dark with the character as Christopher Nolan does in, the second Batman movie. his second Batman movie. I mean, the one from 2008, which ended up winning Heath Ledger posthumous Oscar for supporting actor. Jack doesn't, what he does as the character, it never feels as if he's overacting. It feels as if this guy really is crazy, and he was probably a little bit eccentric to begin with, and probably a little twisted, and this now has accentuated it. In that regard, it's like the movie The Mask, many years later, or 7 years later, with Jim Carrey, where putting the mask on gives you superpowers and accentuates, if you're a shitty person, you're going to be even worse. But if you're a good person, you're going to end up using the powers for good. Jack Napier was not a good guy. So whatever kind of otherworldly abilities he has as the Joker, he uses them for the most devious ends possible. And the performance is fantastic. And I like Michael Keaton as Batman, but this is another movie that Jack puts on his back and runs away with it. He just, whole cloth, steals the movie from everyone else. And it's great because every minute he's on screen, he's riveting. Winged freak, terrorizes. Wait till they get a load of me. Amazing, amazing performance. Now, the last of the five is a movie that I don't love, but I love the performance by Jack, and that's A Few Good Men, Rob Reiner's story of high crimes in the military. It was based on, at the time, a very young Aaron Sorkin's super successful Broadway play of the same title. And it was perfectly cast, great actors all, from the late, great J.T. Walsh, who Jack adored and was very, very hurt and crushed when he died so young. But Tom Cruise brings it, and Demi Moore is very solid, and Kevin Bacon. The cast is really great. Oh, Kevin Pollak also. Sometimes I get the Kevins mixed up. Kevin Pollak was very, very solid in the movie. But Jack plays Colonel Nathan Jessup, and this is a movie I feel like younger people are less likely to have seen than the other ones I mentioned, with the possible exception of Witches of Eastwick. Well, Gen Z certainly, they may not have seen any Jack Nicholson movies, maybe not even The Departed. But A Few Good Men, I think, is good but not great. I like what Cruise does with the character. You know, he played an attorney a year later to, I think, greater effect in the adaptation of John Grisham's The Firm. But Jack's character in A Few Good Men, it might be a one-note character, but it doesn't strain credulity. It's believable that this is how this particular individual, Nathan Jessup, would be. This is how he would act and react. He would be resolute and steadfast in the idea that I am trying to protect what's ours. You put me here. You put me here near Gitmo. Or you put me here to make sure, you know, what was it? I got 500 Cuban soldiers who were trained to kill me. Whatever the number was. But this is somebody who is willing to bend the rules as he sees fit. Because, hey, you guys kept promoting me. You give me this kind of authority. I'm going to do what I feel is right. I'm going to do my job to the best of my ability. And normally that's okay. But when you start getting into situations where the people under your command are getting killed or maimed or injured or bullied just because you think that it's necessary, well, that's a whole nother scenario. And Jack did get an Oscar nomination for playing Jessup. He didn't end up winning. He's not in the movie that much, but every time he's on screen, you can't take your eyes off him. And that's that magical, undefinable quality called screen presence. And Jack Nicholson, no matter the role, whether it's the smile, whether it's the scowl, whether it's what he does with his eyes when he's pissed off, he's a man. And it's the fifth movie that in my top five of Jack Nicholson. Now, I want to point out one movie from the 80s I should have mentioned, Prince's Honor, directed by the father of his former longtime love, Angelica Houston, directed by the great John Huston, who I mentioned on the channel. He did the movie Victory with Michael Caine, Sylvester Stallone, and Pele, the soccer movie crossed with The Great Escape, basically. Pritzi's Honor is Mr. and Mrs. Smith 20 years before Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And it's as good a black comedy as I've ever seen. It's closer to a regular comedy, but it's still technically a black comedy, where you have a pair of mafia hitman, hit woman who end up falling in love, and what's going to happen. Because I remember when Mr. and Mrs. Smith was first teased in a trailer, I said, this is a remake of Pritzi's Honor. What are they doing here? It's not a remake, but it certainly was inspired by. And Jack in Pritzi's Honor, it's another sort of iconic Jack performance. Charlie Partana, he speaks with kind of a funny accent, and he's a clown, but he's a very dangerous man. For all the giggles. It would be like a more comedic version of Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas. A real funny guy who isn't necessarily going to just kill you if you get on his case, but he's still somebody, don't fuck with this guy. Just let him do his thing, leave him alone. Stay out of his way would be a better idea. So before I close, because I have been somewhat critical, I guess you could say, of Jack. I have mentioned certain performances that other people love that I didn't unabashedly embrace and think was, oh my God, so amazing. In the early 2000s, Jack did 2 movies back to back, one of which was very successful financially, the other not so much. But they both serve to highlight that even as Jack was moving through his 60s and was starting to play different kinds of roles, because in 2002, he would have been, he would have been going on 65, 66 in the next year. He did a movie called About Schmidt. Alexander Payne, who would soon thereafter do Sideways, the movie with Bruce Dern, what was it called? Alabama? No, Nebraska, I'm sorry. And he did the movie with George Clooney, where he's in Hawaii. It's funny, I can't remember that movie. The Descendants, I'm sorry. He did the film with Matt Damon where he got miniaturized. Payne is just fantastic. Oh, and he just did The Holdovers with Paul Giamatti. So About Schmidt, Jack plays his age. He plays a guy who has had some success professionally. He's getting ready to retire, and he has a wife he's probably been with for decades, but he doesn't really know her that well. And it ends up not being what we expect. And it was marketed as a comedy, again, genre, but it's not really a comedy. It's a very sad movie, but it also is loaded with humanity. And in this film, Jack finds that. It's the least movie star performance of any that I have mentioned here. And it showed, much like Al Pacino in Donnie Brasco, after so many performances where he is sort of screaming and yelling and grandstanding, where he mostly dials it down. And About Schmidt, there is almost nothing of the sort of classic Jack. I want you to hold it between your knees. There's none of that in About Schmidt. He totally becomes this character of Warren Schmidt, this kind of sad sack who has he should have lived a better life. And now he's 65. And what am I going to do with the rest of my days? What can I do? Am I still young enough to really enjoy myself if I go away? What do I do? And Jack hits every note. He's so good in that movie. The next year, he's in the film Something's Gotta Give, which many, even younger people, will probably have seen. Beautifully cast. Keanu Reeves plays a heart surgeon, he plays Jack's doctor. And the recent, at the time, Oscar winner for Fargo, Frances McDormand, plays Diane Keaton's sister. And Frances is great, although her role is limited. And Diane ended up getting a ton of acclaim, although I feel like her character wasn't written particularly well. And it's ironic because her character in the movie is a super successful playwright named Erica Barry. And in that movie, Jack plays a character, what I believe is the closest representation of how we perceive he is and was in real life. He's a guy in his mid-60s who, and I'm being serious, he's been dating 25-year-olds for the last 40 years. And the film is a trifle. It's not great. The first half, I think, is great, and then it kind of goes off a little bit, jumps the shark. It's still good. It's a 3-star out of 4, but I feel like the first hour is so strong, it was on its way to being maybe maybe not a great film, but something better than what it was. And I feel like the filmmakers, was it Nancy Meyers? She got caught up in having a certain arc for Diane's character that didn't work. And I feel like it doesn't work. But Jack's performance does. Even though he's playing a character that is a variation on others, this feels like he's playing close to what he was like at this time and for the few decades prior. Because he plays a guy named Harry Sanborn, who is a super successful music industry producer. And his net worth, we're led to believe, would have been up there with Jack Nicholson's real life net worth. But even though he would seemingly be on cruise control, I feel he gives a better performance in this movie than he does in As Good as It Gets, where he won an Oscar. It's, to me, Jack's last great performance, and something's got to give. I feel like he's at least as good as Diane, if not better. But that's because his character, to me, was written better. She came to play. Diane gives it everything she has. I just don't like what they did with the character of Erica Barry. I feel like they made some strategic choices which don't really work. And the last film I'm going to mention is The Departed, which is a movie that so many people love, and I just don't like it. 3 stars out of 4. And that's because of Scorsese, because his direction is magnificent. The uncompromising nature of it, you never know who's going to get killed and all that kind of stuff. That's good. Don't love the performances. Don't really like what Damon does. I'm not really into Leo's performance. Wahlberg is good. The movie to me is just okay. And Jack's performance is, to me, it wasn't calibrated properly. He's too over the top, overwrought. And, he's essentially playing the same character that Johnny Depp played in Black Mass, Whitey Bulger. I know Depp is an entirely different kind of actor than Jack, but I would have preferred a quieter, more interior performance, because I feel like this guy would not have been nearly as broad as what we were presented with. But hey, I'm in the very much minority when it comes to The Departed. I know a lot of people who would put it in their 10 favorite films of all time list. Didn't work for me. Same time, though, I was happy that Scorsese won the Best Director Oscar, because politics, they fucking owed him one. How did he not win for Taxi Driver? How did he not win for Raging Bull? How did he not win for Goodfellas? I love Steven Spielberg and Schindler's List, but what Scorsese does in The Age of Innocence is something else. It is next level. He probably should have won for that. And he probably should have won for The Aviator also. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride. They gave Scorsese his Best Director Oscar. Politics. Not the way we normally mean the word. But it is amazing that I feel like Jack was probably not the right actor for that part. Remake The Departed and put Johnny Depp in it. Forget Black Mass. Put Johnny Depp in that role. I feel like the movie's better. But hey, you know what they say about opinions. You know what they're like? I'm not going to say it out loud. It's just my opinion. I could be wrong, and it's okay, because that's how much of this is purely subjective, right? Almost all of it. I love Jack Nicholson. And it was great. There had been some reports that his health had gone downhill. And he, not that long ago, earlier this year, went to a Lakers game. He looked terrific, interacting with fans and stuff like that. So I hope that Jack Nicholson has many more healthy and happy years. The world is a much more interesting place with him in it. He's such a character. Some people are natural characters when they're not acting, and clearly he is one of them. Happy 87th. To an absolute fucking legend and a GOAT of film acting, Jack Nicholson. This has been episode 164 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me here on this Monday, now evening in New York. But if you caught this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you checked out this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 165 real soon. Until then, you can't handle the truth.